the Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Zakash here again with my co-host Tulio Siragusa and our special guest today, who we'll introduce in a moment. So, if you feel like we have a lot of Stone Age emotions running loose and businesses are organized like medieval feudal empires and using industrial era soulless business practices, and all this is getting networked and broadcast and amplified globally through technology, and it's outpacing our collective wisdom. You're probably right, I know, but it sounds dark, but I will say, that we're seeing more and more leaders talking about empathy and creating authentic cultures, where people feel connected and supported and empowered and are living and working with meaning. And I love that every week, we are showing how that can be done in tangible ways. And our guest today is on kind of a similar path. And we are exploring the role empathy plays in leadership and how organizations can create cultures that thrive. So Tulio, introduce our special guest today.
It will be my pleasure. Today we have Sarah Feely. She's the Chief Learning Officer of Compassionate Leaders Circle. Sarah's passionate about helping individuals at all career levels discover their authentic selves and find meaning at work. She's earned a Master's of Science in Learning and Organizational Change from Northwestern University and is a certified executive and organizational coach. At Compassionate Leaders Circle, Sarah helps organizations align business strategy with people strategy by developing customized learning, coaching, leadership retreats, and organizational change initiatives. Her experience spans executive recruiting, leadership advisory, cultural transformation, and talent development through roles at Korn Ferry and Hillstone Restaurant Group. Throughout her career, Sarah has worked across hospitality, consumer products, life sciences, leadership development, and organizational transformation, bringing a thoughtful and people-centered approach to leadership and growth. Sarah, welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast. We're excited to have you
today. Tulio, thank you. That intro, who wrote that? No, I'm kidding. It's great. Nice to see you.
Sarah's usually on the other side of the question, so she's Sarah, before we get started, tell everyone a little bit about the Compassionate Leader Awards, because I think it's a great way to kind of get the types of stories that we like to tell in front of more people.
I love it. And that's, Steven, that's how you and I got connected, because you were nominated like 25 times. You're doing something right.
25.
So,
wow. All right.
Yeah. So about 6 years ago, the founder and CEO of our company, Laurel Donnellan, had this idea. We're like we're in COVID. She's like, there are so many people in the corners of their world doing incredible, empowering, uplifting work. Let's celebrate them. And so the Compassionate Leader Circle Awards were founded, and we basically crowdsourced hundreds of people and said, nominate a compassionate leader who you know well or who inspires you. We had them use our Compassionate Leaders model, which is the 7 C's. So pick a C and describe this person. And so 6 years have passed, and we've had thousands of nominations and gotten to meet all these amazing people all around the world who are doing incredible things and really changing the world in big and small ways. And so that's the CLC Awards. And so Steven, we're nominated.
And I think you said you get to interview around 200 or so a year business leaders, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot. And that's a lot of great stories that, people need to hear, because, I mentioned all those things at the top of the show, because I think that's kind of the reality that people are in and stuck in day to day a lot of the times. But there's these really great stories out there that I think need to be told. And you're doing a wonderful job with that. And, so much appreciation for what you're doing out there. Receive that appreciation.
Absolutely. We need to water our guests with each other too. Those are the kind of leaders we want to talk to as well. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So
Sarah, what were you about to say? You're about to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say this concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy is so true and backed by science. Like, and if we keep telling ourselves societally, right, if we have a collective reality, whether it's true or real, right, something cannot be true. But if we experience it as real, it lives as real. And so this idea, if we're telling ourselves a story like, oh, the world's going to hell, oh, it's never been this bad, oh, people aren't innately good. I mean, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We see the world that way. And so to your point, like, it is so important to tell these stories, because the truth of the matter is that people are good. More people are good than not. And there's really good things happening and people need to hear about it. And so I appreciate what you all do with the same thing.
No. Exactly. That's like, I just wanted to highlight, this is the reality I think most of us really probably feel right now, on your shoulders and everything when you're out there. But it's like, there are actually really good stories out there. And, when you end up working too with some of these people or some of these companies, you kind of almost can't go back to the other way things are run.
No, you can't. Once you've experienced that, it's very hard to go back. You feel dirty going back. So, Sarah, your work, you focus a lot on helping people discover their authentic self, and stay with me for a second here, and also finding meaning at work. So I find it always interesting that people will look for a company that gives them meaning, but sometimes miss the step of first being self-aware and becoming their self-authentic selves, and then discovering meaning. So I'm just curious, one, why does authenticity play such a big part in becoming an effective leader, and in actually creating meaning at work at an organizational level?
Yeah, what a great question. I think oftentimes people have a sense of identity, a sense of self-worth, a sense of meaning by the title, by some power they've given the outside world that they attribute to them. And this is like not a new concept, this idea that like, I am my work, or I am this. And what we do, and what many, coaches and leaders and people like yourself, you say, let's flip the script. You need to know who you are at your core so you can show up in the right, most authentic way. And authenticity is a word that is thrown around a lot. Sometimes it has a bad meaning. It's actually like the psychological definition of it is really complex. So it's like, it has to do with the authenticity, like how self-aware are you? How real are your relationships? How much do you feel like the world that you live in feels like true to you? And authenticity evolves over time. But it's this idea that like, if you want to be a leader and you want to really impact others, your very first responsibility is to know thyself, because you can only show up sort of as the best version of yourself, understanding what your innate motivators are, understanding like what gets you fired up. You can only do that when you know yourself. And then that will translate to many things, including leadership, impact of others, performance, etc. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. I'm also curious about what impacts that has on an organization. So when the collective is authentic, what impact does that have on how the organization or the company runs its business?
I mean,
we put a lot of pressure on the company. If they only got it together, it's like, well, maybe the individual collectively have to do the work to get it together as an organization. So I'm curious, in your work, you see that happening, and where people get tripped up on that.
Yeah, totally. And like, it really takes two to tango, meaning like the organization has to provide like this sort of space for people to exist and be able to thrive. And the individual has to take like a tremendous amount of ownership to also like know what they need to thrive. And, I think authenticity is like one piece of a bigger puzzle. But like, we all know that it is exhausting to not be able to be yourself. And I don't mean like be yourself like if it's like a corporate culture where we all wear a suit and tie, like I'm just going to show up in my PJs. That's not authenticity. That's like, great. Maybe you should work in a different company with a different culture. But this idea that a collective sense that's also sort of culture by the organization is also important to sort of an individual ownership of it. And you asked a question earlier, and but this idea of meaning, it's like a really interesting, complex topic, this idea of meaning at work, because, some people say, well, it's a great example of like a bus driver who's like, well, my life's purpose isn't driving a bus. It's like, there is a difference between the task of your work and the impact you make in your work, right? So like maybe you don't particularly like bus driving isn't the task you had in mind, but if you view your work as being able to create
you're helping maybe like an elderly person get to a doctor's appointment or something like that. You've got like 1,000 stories a day of how you're helping people, right? And that's kind of understanding, pulling that out into real meaning for your work, right? Instead of just, I'm a bus driver.
Yes. Thank you, Stephen. So like meaning is not derived by the task, right? It's derived by the impact.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So true.
Yeah. And Sarah, from your perspective, why has empathy become such an important quality for leaders in today's kind of workplace environment? It's something we're talking about a lot more, and thankfully, but 15, 20 years ago, it really wasn't in a common discussion. It'd be hard to find people really focusing on it like they are these days.
You have stuff back then.
Yeah, and you have all kinds of studies now around empathy in every part of your business, and so it's kind of showing statistically, in a lot of ways, how it's really actually also the most profitable thing sometimes. But
100%. No, thank goodness for the data, right? Like we've got the business case. I would say, sometimes you just do something because it's the right thing to do, like treat humans like humans. But B, the data shows us that it actually impacts the bottom line, like consistently. But I think we're in a different time. Like we've got, a group of millennials and Gen Zers. The generational differences are real, and we've got people who care about being treated like humans, and people have always cared about being treated like humans, but I think we're establishing newer and clearer baselines for how someone wants to feel and be treated at work. And
the way I think about this is really this is the gravity of love. Like and consciousness is kind of following it. So as you've got these younger generations, they're coming up to this very empathetic place very fast compared to like the previous generation, because there's been a lot of work done, a lot of gravity that's kind of led the way there. So they're getting up there fast. Now they're going to take it and move it beyond like a few steps further than, even where we are. So it's really interesting, the power of that sort of gravity that's kind of pulling this into these stages of business consciousness.
And also, they're not buying into what we were sold, which was intentionally designed to get you so committed and intertwined and overextended that you wouldn't dare to question anything. So we just sucked it up and did what we had to do. It wasn't that we didn't have the same desire. We just kind of sucked it up. Now, the newer generation are smarter. They're not overextending themselves. They're not overcommitting themselves financially, especially. So they have more freedom as a result. And they're like, nah, that's not going to work for me, And collectively, by doing that, they're putting everybody on notice, which is brilliant. But ultimately, we all desire that same thing, to have meaning, to be treated like not a cog in the wheel. It's just nice to see the newer generations are doing the right things, not to put themselves in a place of being a victim of the system, because unfortunately the system has created the problem too. What do you think about
Yes. Something that came to mind was like, and again, this is not a new concept, but like, the human brain is like so wired to be protective and fear-based, right? Like we evolved to have this limbic system that is like, whoa, I'm going to shut down, or I'm going to fight back. I'm going to fight or flight. And our societal norms, the way we work, has so far outpaced like our brains, right? So we as humans are living in with a brain, with a chemical system that's like fear-based, fight or flight, shuts down quickly, gets really protective. And the greatest way to access human flourishing, well-being, creativity, collaboration is empathic human connection, right? I mean, it's like there's all this really cool neuroscience around it. And so, not to get too like scientific and brainy about it, but like aside from what the zeitgeist and the sort of current climate feels about love and empathy, it's the greatest way to tap into these age-old archaic brains we have.
Yeah, I think we've built systems based on that fear and that kind of, everything is kind of a little bit dysfunctional, and we put that into systems and we're systemizing it. And really that's where we kind of talk about building love into scalable systems. There's a lot that goes into that complexity wise, but it's one of those glues that works as we're in these complicated systems, where you got systems within systems within systems. And how do you make that healthy? And so you've got to continually kind of audit your systems for compassion, for care, for love, for kindness, that kind of thing, because that's what brings it all together. Even though there's very complex systems, and it's like you said, it's all this sort of fear-based stuff that we've built into it. So that brings me, we like to talk about systems and kind of things that maybe you've seen where there is this sort of systemized kindness or some part of a practice of businesses with all the people you've interviewed, things like that, where you see this compassion being sort of systemized. Anything that pops into mind for you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love this. And you all have just brilliantly, you talk about this. It's like this idea of compassionate, love-based systems. And I think we oftentimes, like, especially with certain clients, right, there's like this false dichotomy of like, well, I either have to develop my people to be compassionate and loving, or my systems. And it's like, no, it takes both. It's like, this is not an either or thing. And so a lot of times people will want to invest in like the leaders are the issue. And it's like, we call it clean fish, dirty pond. Like your systems are the pond and your fish are your leaders. And you can just, give these leaders all these cool mindsets and skill sets. And then you throw them back into systems that are not based around love and compassion. Like, guess what happens? And so to your point, like around systems, we do a whole culture audit model methodology where we look at people's systems, right? Whether it's, hiring, onboarding, recognition, benefits, rewards, and how are you, and I'm not answering your question specifically yet, but really this idea of like, it's got to be a full court press to sort of acknowledge, yes. Right? Acknowledge and then incentivize whatever you're trying to build. And so, for example, if you have espoused values about belonging, and you've got a leader who consistently in meetings doesn't cultivate belonging in a really like tangible way of like interrupting people and not having openness to new ideas. And then that person who doesn't cultivate that espoused value gets promoted and retained and greater responsibility. Like, you got to sort of practice what you preach. And so I'm taking sort of the negative angle or the lack aspect of your question, but I think that the organizations we work with who are doing it really well go from high level value to very specific behaviors and expectations. They get from conceptual to actual, and then they've got performance management systems and incentive systems and reward systems that make it really clear what expectations are and reward those accordingly. And those are the people who like create these self-reinforcing virtuous cycles. So I don't know if that it's not.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, and it is like system, like when you're talking about like a recognition system, this is, and I always say, you know, you can have the leader giving out recognition, but I always say that that's one person carrying the torch. But when you have everyone else start carrying that torch, then that's what lights up the culture, right? That's how you build that system so that it's transferred to kind of everyone in there. And now you've got that recognition culture, but it doesn't really happen unless you're, like you said, going in and auditing and looking for these gaps in your systems. And, you know, and we always say, just, you know, audit for love, audit for, if you don't have a purpose that you're auditing for, a higher meaning in what you're doing, audit for love if you don't know what your higher purpose is. And do that.
I love that, audit for love. I think that's brilliant and clear. And if maybe some people need to be clear about what that is. Maybe that's like, what's the golden rule? I tell my 4-year-old this. But yeah, I love that, audit for love.
I think part of the problem is most systems are designed to improve metrics. So company goes through an organizational redesign, it's around some metrics they're trying to achieve. Get realignment, there's some metrics associated with it. But how can leadership development programs genuinely support people, not just the metrics? And what impact does that have on the metrics?
Yeah. I mean, these are sort of like leading and lagging indicators, you know. The metrics, I mean, so organizations, and particularly public ones, but all of them, there's like a real unfortunate sort of short-term blindness, right? And
fear-based. We go back to fear, short-term thinking, right there.
Yeah. Well woven, Stephen. And I think that is a pay now, pay later, in that you know, you don't want to. You either invest in your people and your systems today, and eventually the business, the metrics you want to see that are more bottom line, you know, oriented will follow. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of a short, I mean, it's maybe oversimplification, but it's like a short-term trade-off when you think that you're just going to invest in a certain set of business, you know, P&L oriented metrics, when really your people drive your business and you have to invest in them first.
Yeah, we need like P&Ls for compassion and care or something at work, right? You need to move. I guess that's kind of like, in a way, triple bottom line kind of approach, where you've got your profit, but you're also looking at, okay, people, you know, planet in those ways. So there's, you know, so what's the P&L look like for the planet that you're, you know, impacting with your business? What's it look like for the people that you've got those kind of metrics you can probably draw up there for each of those. But if we aren't measuring it, you know, it's just going to get run over by profit.
What gets measured gets done, right? And the problem is when you have like a dearth of data where you can't quite, you know, you can't make the case. But, you know, there's a movement. It started by John Mackey and, you know, conscious capitalism, and Tulio. They've got a nice chapter in Dallas. I can bring you along. But there's been a lot of data.
We had Raj on the show.
You had Raj on the show.
Yeah,
yes.
we had him on. Yeah.
Okay, that guy. I mean,
conscious capitalism royalty on the show.
He is royalty, and so you know about this original data that's like, you know, these companies. It's a false dichotomy we've created about, you know, these metrics and where we're investing.
The thing is, it's not working, and what I find fascinating is that companies aren't listening to, are actually paying attention to the new data, because Gallup did a study just recently this year Only 31% of employees are engaged in the US, 21% globally. I mean, that's the real epidemic. That's like paying an entire year's salary to people to only get 3 months worth of work out of them. And it's being accepted as good. Like a CEO will go to the street and say, hey, we had great performance based on 31% productivity, because no one's tracking the performance metrics or the satisfaction of the employees. There's no metrics for that.
I mean, and Tulio, and I think
it impacts productivity.
Tulio, I think the most consequential question that and I've said this before, that we need to ask is, what are people becoming in our broken systems? If 4 out of 5 are disengaged or unhappy at work, they're bringing a lot of that home. You know, how's this impacting families? How's this impacting communities? And how's this spread out to the world? So when we really, think about it, when we're inside these broken systems, however many, hours every week, this is impacting. The ripple effect on this is massive.
We had Gary Ridge on the show, and when he mentioned that, I remember him talking about that. Stuck with me ever since. This idea that we have such a responsibility, especially leaders, where you can impact society in a greater way than even governments can. Because imagine you go home and you just came out of a very toxic environment. You talk about how terrible your boss is, or your colleagues are, the work system, and your kids are listening to this. And then we wonder why they're so disengaged, or mental health is at an all-time high. It's like they have nothing to look forward to. Versus you go home feeling like you've been empowered, you grew, you had an opportunity to be part of something greater that had meaning, and you talk about it, and you go home feeling wonderful, and it creates hope for the future. I just don't think we're putting enough attention on, speaking of metrics, on the role, for example, purpose plays in a business, or even having a purpose. Many businesses, like, our purpose is to create shareholder value. That's not a purpose. That's a statement. No.
Well, I love Sarah. Like, what Sarah's doing though is like bringing these stories up. You know, she's interviewing 200 people and bringing these stories up so that, they're not lost in all of this madness that's going on.
Yeah. And, I would say, I love that you're bringing up this sort of ripple effect that work has on someone's life and community and children. I mean, I don't know about you too, but like, I have been in, and my husband has been in, we've all been in these troughs, these periods where work is, life sucking, soul sucking. A lot of my coaching clients are like, I can't have the next 15 years look like the previous 15 years. Like, and what it does to well-being and, your sort of personal circles, and to your point, your children and all that. It's work. I think we are made to work, and I'll use that term loosely. We're made to contribute. We're made to have a sense of, if you think about like the sort of building blocks of well-being, is there's purpose, and there's really the feeling engaged in something, right? Call it flow, but being good at something and contributing to society, whether that's being a full-time, stay-at-home parent versus running a company. We are wired to contribute to the world and bring our gifts to the world. And when that is compromised by a really poor working environment, everyone suffers.
Yeah. We all desire to make an impact. And in fact, a lot of studies, even one from PwC, shows that most employees are very find better alignment when a company has a purpose, like purpose beyond the numbers. They have more meaning and values around supporting that purpose. So I'm curious, how has that shaped your leadership journey? Maybe you could share a moment where empathy or human connection made a meaningful impact in your work or someone's life. We'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I've been.
Well, what impact is being purposeful? What has that happened in the work you do?
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm 42, and it took me a while, but I feel like I finally found my purpose, and I feel like lucky to have had the space and the time. And I was working in corporate America, and had kids and stepped away and have now created, cultivated like a work life that works for me. And I feel like I'm living my purpose. And I think, part of it though, is that I was just, always been such an achievement oriented person that I realized for most of my life, I was doing things for some sort of extrinsic reward. And it took me a long time to realize that whenever the achievements come, they are fleeting. They're like a dopamine hit because they weren't necessarily intrinsically motivated. And so like I took a lot of time and went through a lot of highs and lows to be like, what gets you going, Sarah? And not because you should, or because someone wants you to, or the world will think, this is great, or, oh, you're, say yes and everyone will love you, because that stuff is fleeting. And so, Julia, to your question about purpose, is it's like, I think if we can all be lucky enough to look inward, and it's not just a look, it's like a deep sort of like PhD, if you can, on yourself, to say like, find that purpose and go do it. It's like the Howard Thurman quote. It's like the world needs people who have come alive. Or don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and then go do it, because the world needs people who have come alive.
And you felt that, right? When you found that little bit of purpose, you felt like the energy suddenly like
totally. And like
come alive in you, right?
That's when you're no longer working. You're no longer working then. You're just fulfilling something. But
I do feel like, it's like, I want to make sure this message is like, a lot of people don't have, call it the privilege, call it whatever, like I can't quit I'm working at name retail job that they don't particularly care about, or they're like, that sounds really nice, but I can't, this is not my purpose. And I would say, like, to many people, and some of the coaching we do and the development programs we do called Purpose Lab is really about, like, we don't just have one purpose in life, and we don't just derive purpose from work. And there will be chapters in life, and there will be roles that you play in your life, whether it's a community role, a parental role, a caretaking role, a work role, that each have a very deliberate and clear purpose. And so while you might not be in a work role that feels like the ultimate purpose, I think you can still find meaning in it, even though it can be harder for some. And B, there are other roles that you might be in currently where you can find deep purpose. While I know this is a work about business, we are all whole people. And so there's a way to tap into purpose as you think about your life as a really broad sense of yourself.
For you, how did you tap into it? Was it, because I think it's a lot of times I'll just ask you, how did you tap into it rather than me kind of explaining what probably happened?
Yeah. It's like a combination of like a 30-year sort of a life crisis of like having my first child and realizing I felt so disconnected from what I was doing. Having the space to I got my own coach, which was really helpful. I started doing some own work around what gets me going, what are my shoulds. I had a great therapist who he told me, this is like a whole nother conversation, but he was like, I was telling him how great I was because I'm not on social media and I don't have FOMO and I was like, I'm so great. And he was like, Sarah, you should yourself more than any of my other clients. Okay. And he said that shoulding yourself is more insidious than comparing yourself to others, because you're comparing yourself to an unattainable version of yourself. So I realized, this is through a long answer to your question, I had this idea of myself that was not derived from myself. It was what I wanted to be to other people. And so it took several years of unpacking and some deep discomfort. Does that it gets to it a little bit?
Yeah. And thinking about shoulding yourself, the question I always ask on this show is, what role should love play in business? But maybe we shouldn't be. What role, we talk about love as, a leadership principle, compassion is infrastructure. what role must love play in business, do you think?
Yes, no more shoulds, right?
Yeah, no more shoulds.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are all human. And we talked about this before we started recording. Like, some people find discomfort in love. I think the three of us are like on the love train, but find a way to connect to the human in everything you do, and it won't lead you astray.
It's true. I like Tulio knows this. I always say, yeah, and I've said on the show a number of times, but people know this. Is make connection the goal of things. When you keep that, because you can go into any kind of hostile, situation, or any kind of, something went sideways like it always does. But if you're not making that connection a goal, then you're going to lose that human connection part. Why don't you think we see more love in business? I mean, you're deep in it all the time with, talking to all these different folks that are really showing it. But on the broad scale, why don't we see more of it in business?
I think at our core, we're fear-based, and we protect ourselves, and that's why. And there's like a domino effect for all these things, right? It's like, Brene Brown talks about it. It's like, if you can be vulnerable, what it does to open relationships to others. And I think ultimately we're all busy. People say that it feels like it's nice to have, not need to have. But I think at the end of the day, like, we're all wired to protect ourselves. It's like this, it's an interesting irony, because we are wired to be groupish. We're wired to be reciprocal. So we have to, we're, evolutionarily wired to live in cohesive groups. And then at the same time, we're also then wired to like protect ourselves sort of from that group. And so I think we don't see as much love because we don't, our knee-jerk reaction is to protect, when that's not really what we all need.
I also think it's a commitment issue. What is really love it's commitment. And it's societal. There's a lot less willing to commit to people, to each other, because if to love someone is to be committed to them. And it's so easy to just be in an environment where everything is you can let go of someone if you're not committed to them. And we see that not just in business, we see that in a lot of relationships. So it's not serving us as a society, for sure. And this is just my own interpretation of why I think some companies are afraid to talk about love, because that's a different level of commitment. It's a mutual commitment to each other to stay in the course. And it's a scary place to be, because a lot of companies try to treat people like disposable cogs on the wheel. What do you think about that? Are you seeing that out there, or is that just still something that's fading?
Yeah. Well, I want to second what you're saying and maybe amend my, I do think that this answer all sort of ties together, which is we're seeing like an erosion of community societally at a lot of levels, right? You look at like, whether it's church going is down, or you've got people more transient than ever before, right? I don't know the statistics, but in many places people leave where they're from, and that's not a bad thing. But you've got all these instances of erosion of community, and you see it as people have gone to remote or hybrid work. And I'm like all for remote work and hybrid work. But what happens is that there's a disconnection from the commitment, from the community, to a sense of like, we are connected individuals, part of something bigger than ourselves, i.e. this organization. And so like what I'm seeing, and you see companies I think there are a lot of companies who are realizing that actually, if we can, to use your word, commit, and we can do deliberate practices to increase call it community commitment, like a sense of cohesion, that we are something bigger than yourself as an individual. I mean, we're seeing clients who are like, we don't know how to do this given the current state of work, but we know that this matters. And so, Tulio, I think some companies are using this hybrid work, this sort of like dissolution of community as like, great, let's cut our real estate budget and just let them go. And I think others are getting with the program and realizing people need to feel connected and committed to perform. And I think, and to harken back to the culture audit that we do about systems, one of the things that we look at when we do these audits is commitment and cohesion, which is this perception that I am a part of something bigger than myself, and I am specifically part of this unit, this team, which a leader has tremendous power over, and then sort of the macro, like that organization. So it's, back to my Korn Ferry days, a team leader is responsible for 70 to 80% of a team's climate, this idea of how someone really experiences their work. And so, yes, you can have organizational systems that increase this sort of commitment and love, but there's tremendous power in the team leader.
True. So one last thing, we can give a little gift to the audience. If they have remembered only one thing from this show, what's something they can start right now, practice, that can increase their empathy and their leadership? They only remember one thing. What should that be?
So the word compassion is inclusive of empathy in that it's feeling with someone. But by definition, compassion then necessitates action. And so when we sort of do like baby steps into compassionate leadership, it's an action orientation towards another human. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the sort of baby steps is like, take an action towards cultivating a relationship. That could be a peer-to-peer relationship. That could be managing up. That could be managing, a direct report. But taking action to get to know someone in some way, I would say we can all be compassionate leaders by taking action. I'm going to murk up my own statement. You Tulio, you teed me up with like a very clean, clear, like hit the ball out of the park closing. But I recently gave a speech about the difference between being a coach, being a mentor, and being a sponsor. And these are really distinct, important roles. But what I would say is, whether you are like an emerging leader or you are an existing leader, you have tremendous power to elevate someone's work experience. Take action on that in some way.
Yeah. Show someone you believe in them. I love it. Okay. So if people want to get to know you, connect with you, where should they go?
Yeah. So compassionateleadercircle.com is our website. I'm on LinkedIn. I love talking about this stuff. I like, the data and the research. So I always tell people like, reach out, call me. I'll talk to anyone about this. And so I do one-on-one executive coaching, but also do a lot of group coaching and then organizational leadership development. So I'd love to talk about all that and everything in between.
Yeah, I love it. Sarah, thank you for joining us today. Great conversation. To our listeners, thank you again for listening, always tuning in. And I know businesses must be profitable or they're dead, but if they worship profit, they can still be culturally and spiritually dead while being profitable. So if you're a leader, create environments where people feel valued, heard, and inspired to grow. And lasting cultures, I think, are built like on some of the things we talked about, like through empathy, through authenticity, and through that meaningful connection. So kind of audit for those kind of things, and that's how you kind of build toward that bliss business that we're kind of talking about. So thank you for joining us, everyone, on the Bliss Business Podcast, and we will see you next time.